TyePod, hosted by your friendly neighborhood PhD. Well, hi everybody, it's another edition of the TyePod, and today I am joined by Abbey Phillipson, who is a para and conditioning coach for adaptive sports, which obviously involves people with various disabilities. So happy to have you on, Abbey, and looking forward to visiting a little bit about what you do.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, definitely. But just starting out, if you want to share a little bit about your journey in general, how you got to this position, and maybe any experience you had with, maybe disability or anything related in your kind of your story so far.
Absolutely. So I'm the para strength and conditioning coach at the University of Michigan. So we offer 5 different Paralympic sports. We have wheelchair basketball, wheelchair tennis, wheelchair rugby, with the Team USA captain Chuck Aoki as our rugby coach and an athlete. We have para powerlifting, and we also have adaptive track and field. And so I'm the strength and conditioning coach. So I'm the only coach who gets to see every single athlete and customize their athletic performance and strength and conditioning coaches throughout the span of their season and hopefully their lifetime as an athlete. But how I came into this was I was born with a genetic connective tissue disorder called classical Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And so just to give a general overview, my skin is super, super thin and elastic, so a lot of lacerations. A small wound, a bruise for somebody is going to be huge for me, layers of stitches that don't quite hold. Same thing with my internal tissues are very thin, elastic, and fragile. But the biggest component of that is usually joints for most folks. So collagen does a great job at holding your joints together, and when you don't have very much of it, your joints slip out of place. And joints are just the meeting points of bones. So you can imagine that everything just doesn't really keep me upright. It doesn't keep my hands moving very well. So when I was in high school, I had an L4, L5, S1 spondylolisthesis, a stage 5, which is pretty much a complete dislocation of the vertebrae on top of each other. And so I was a wheelchair user for a bit of time in waiting for getting the corrective surgery for that, a little bit of time in my recovery post surgeries, and then I got another surgery and used a walker after that. So I'm no stranger to having to adapt my daily life with my condition being so variable. I wake up sometimes in an able body and sometimes not able to access much at all.
It's kind of dynamic, right? You just never know what you're quite going to get.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I think a really big component of stepping into a coaching space is just having a lens of being able to use my able-bodied days to help the world become more accessible and remove sport from that very long list of things that really only able-bodied folks can access. And sport and physical fitness is a really silly thing to be on there. So if I can use my expertise, my degree, and my postgraduate certifications to help erase some of those things off the list, I would like to think that I'm doing that. And whilst being in the gym on the outside, using my budding platform to also just show people that that's possible to erase that thing off of their list.
I love that. That's really cool. You have, kind of a firsthand experience, I think, of the spectrum of disability then too, based on your different devices you've used over time and kind of evolved in that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you were talking about joints, that with my muscular dystrophy is almost the exact same thing. If you want to find the main problem area, go to one of the joints and it's there. So it's like contractures, lack of flexibility, things like that. So
exactly.
That's a major challenge for sure.
Exactly. And I think growing up with a disability, especially a disability that is progressive, usually the recommendations for healing your body and becoming the strongest, most capable version of yourself oftentimes is only focused through a medical lens. And so it's physical therapy, it's rehab, it's occupational therapy, it's, things like feeding yourself and using the bathroom and getting in and out of bed.
Just the daily living activity.
Right. And I would like to think that with the right approach, we can all kind of get away from just wanting to get out of bed and maybe wanting to win a Paralympic medal. And so just kind of skating down that spectrum of, yes, I have this, but I can and I will do more if we kind of escape the disability first lens and take an athlete approach.
Yeah. And I mean, that has to also factor in kind of the whole mental health, I think, too, and finding something that you're passionate about doing. I think that when you have something like that, the other activities that getting out of bed, like hygiene, all that stuff, it's going to be, in my mind, easier because you have the other thing that you're, kind of a driving force or something, I guess, behind it. Yeah.
Absolutely. If I want to go to practice, I've got to brush my teeth and get out of bed
exactly.
and make myself breakfast.
Incentive, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. As far as like adaptive athletes then that you've worked with, kind of, if you want to give just a sense of what their different talents are, or maybe specific challenges you've had to overcome with maybe an example or two.
Sure. To start off, I think it's really important to recognize that to be a person with a disability who is valued and serves a great purpose of the world. You do not have to be an athlete, right? So I think I hear a lot in terms of the work that I do, reaching out to folks with disabilities or who are identify with that community. It's like, well, what if I don't want to play a sport? Well, physical fitness is still for you. And so I do work with a range of athletes who have no intention on competing ever, let alone going to the Paralympics, but who prioritize their health, mental and physical. And a lot of that comes from being able to do physical activity. So starting with that aside, but I have had the privilege of working with a lot of folks at the top end of parasport. Chuck Aoki, who is captain of Team USA for wheelchair rugby. He has been to, I might get the number wrong, but it's it's at least 6 Paralympic Games.
Wow.
Yep. We had Sam Grew is one of our University of Michigan adaptive track athletes. He won the gold medal in the high jump in Tokyo and just competed this past year in the Paralympics as well. Leo Grew has CP and he ran the 1500 meter at the Paralympics in his category this year. And then we have a couple of folks who were alternates. We had someone on the sled hockey alternate team and who's on the Team USA rugby alternate team as well.
Yeah, nice. I love the diversity there. That's really cool, you know, and even it, for me, it seems like if it's the same sport, like, you know, teammate to teammate, they might have a different need to allow them to play something team-based as well, right? Like on rugby or basketball or something. Like, how do you kind of see that happen where, you know, maybe they have their individual, you know, adaptive needs, but they still are able to come together as a team in that same sport?
Yeah, absolutely. So most para sport is divided into classifications. And so I think adaptive track and wheelchair basketball are really good examples of that. So adaptive track, you are not competing against anyone with a different disability than you. And additionally, let's take cerebral palsy for an example. There are 4 different categories that you can compete in if you have cerebral palsy. So someone who is not very affected by their CP in terms of their running gait versus someone who is very affected by their CP would not compete against each other. So that's a good example of classifications there, combating that in a competitive sense. Wheelchair basketball, you can only have a certain amount of points on a court at a time. So athletes who are less affected by their disability might be something like a 4.5 out of 5. And athletes who are very affected by their disability might be classified as a 1.0. And you have to add up your players to a certain
Interesting. I had no idea that's how that worked.
Yeah. So then you're
Very
encouraged to
cool.
play everybody across the spectrum of classification of disability. So
Yeah,
it is an all-encompassing way to get folks with disabilities to participate with equity.
that makes so much sense because I always wondered, like, you know, well, there's a spectrum of ability, and so like, how do you make sure it's competitive? How do you, you know, make it where all people that want to can kind of participate there? So that point system is cool. I know there's probably not a perfect, you know, setup for it, but that seems like it would encourage, you know, involving more people. Seems
Definitely,
like. Yeah.
definitely. At the University of Michigan, adaptive sports and fitness specifically, we take the approach of adaptive sports are not for people with disabilities. Adaptive sports are just a way to give equitable access to sport. And so we have events every single week where we invite folks who are not part of the disabled community to come in and play sports with us. This is just the way that we play sports all together. Someone needs a chair to play basketball, and so guess what? We're going to play wheelchair basketball. It's just an equity component. So that's something kind of a cool design that we have here. We are hosting tryouts in collegiate wheelchair basketball. You can have 2 able-bodied folks on your team who play wheelchair basketball. So we're actually hosting tryouts for able-bodied basketball players.
Wow. So that's almost like you have an interabled, you know, sports as well, which I mean, you're covering all bases. It seems like they're in a really cool way. I like that.
Yeah, I think if we're being honest with ourselves, we are not looking for kind of this separate but equal standpoint. We really are looking to blur the line between sport and parasport. Can it all just be sport? And the answer is no, if we are barring the rest of the community from buying into the sport that we play.
With like labels and excluding certain populations and everything.
Absolutely.
That makes so much sense. So when you first started, like, is that something that was kind of already there, or how did you like come to get involved with that program?
Yeah, so that was definitely the mission when I started working here. Our program has been developing since 2019 under Dr. Fermi Okunlami. He's kind of the pioneer of adaptive sports who uses a wheelchair himself. And that was really his mission, seeing other schools and organizations that do adaptive sport and seeing a very separate but equal approach, which, you know, it's great that other universities have their own adaptive facilities or adaptive equipment or adaptive meets, but we travel to able-bodied competitions and we compete right there next to folks who are sprinting the 200 meter who have always been able-bodied. And that's great for visibility, and that is great for just claiming space in a space that usually isn't ours, in hopes that someday there's not a space for us and a space for them. There's just sport space.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that's such a cool, I think, way to approach it for sure. I guess I would really like to get your thoughts on like the whole competitive nature of like sports and how, obviously it can get so competitive that it becomes, maybe a detriment or a negative thing. What's your thought on like competition as, more of kind of the better way to approach it versus, getting kind of caught up in just straight comparison or competition?
Yeah, I think especially in this space, it is difficult because there is always going to be someone who may be better than you at the sport, and
Yeah.
it may not be anything to do with their athletic performance and entirely based on the day, the body that they woke up with, the symptoms that they're experiencing. And so I really think it's important in the adaptive space to take the approach of you're competing against yourself.
Yeah.
You want a better you want a better performance in
However
terms
that
of
looks. Yeah.
exactly. And team building is a really important component of that. So buy into your teammate's success, not
Yeah.
as your competitor, but as uplifting adaptive sports as a whole. 100 years down the line, when we've done all this work to kind of blur that sport and parasport
Yeah.
line, can we, focus on just each other as competitors? Yeah, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't want other schools to be really competitive in the adaptive
Right.
sports space. I want Michigan to be number one forever.
Right.
Kinda. I want competition too.
But you want it to be, yeah, you want it to be, at least challenging in a sense too, I think. And that's
Exactly.
representative of just the sport as a whole, just I think making it more targeting the right reasons, if that
Yeah,
makes
it
sense.
would
Yeah.
demonstrate that our mission is working and that
Yeah,
we have
yeah,
a lot of different organizations and colleges who have really competitive adaptive sports teams. So
yeah.
I think we all want each other to be competitive if we're being honest with ourselves.
Right.
Of course, you want to win your match and be stronger than
Right.
the athlete next to you, but I think
But then to hold that in its place relative to, like you're saying, the self competition, self help improvement type of thing. So yeah.
exactly. It's the big picture.
Yep, exactly. What about like negative stigma, like ableism surrounding adaptive sports? Like, how has that been for your experience, and has there been improvements to that, or is there still quite a ways to go to, to I guess show people that is something that's good to be focusing on?
Yeah, I think both can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
That we've seen incredible progress. More people watch the Paralympics this year than ever before by millions. We had a huge win this year that we played our very first wheelchair basketball game against Michigan State's wheelchair basketball game in the Chrysler Center, which is like the stadium of basketball, of collegiate basketball here at the University of Michigan.
Yeah.
And we sold 3,200 tickets.
Wow, that's
We
amazing.
had a packed stadium. People were signing autographs. Like we have a lot of visibility. Traction is gaining. We have budding social media platforms across all colleges that have adaptive sports. So both mature at the same time. We have a lot of wins this year of things that we never thought would be possible in terms of visibility. But then again, what we're trying to do in a space like the weight room is we are doing our programming right next to the able-bodied lacrosse team. We are doing our programming next to the gymnastics team. And at first it is a little uncomfortable. We usually get the backup times when we're trying to make a schedule. We get what's
Oh
left
yeah.
over after
Yeah.
the able-bodied sports. There's a cafe that's in this center that all athletics have access to. Our team does not.
Okay.
So there are some things for our roster. As adaptive sports teams, not every school usually has a large enough population of athletes with disabilities to make up a full roster. So we invite members from the community to join our team who have a disability and compete with us. They're not allowed to use any of the University of Michigan facilities. So
Okay.
there are some pieces that we're really having to chip away and pioneer for ourselves. I hate
Well, I
that
was
we get the
asking
luck.
if you had seen, like, do you feel like that's something you guys can keep kind of pushing towards to make it a little bit more equitable in that way?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. This very space that I am sitting in right now is called the SPC, and it's the Performance Center, the Athletic Performance Center at Michigan. 2 years ago, we did not have any access in this building without having
Mhm.
to pay a significant amount of money. Now we are in this building 5 days a week. So,
Nice.
and we
Yeah.
host a meet here. So access is a tricky one because you have to talk to the right people, the people who you have to foster that buy-in with those people, make
Mm.
sure that they're bought into the mission that you are creating as well. But there are barriers that we will have to continue to kind of chip away at over the next few
Right.
years. But
Right. Yeah,
mhm,
that's understandable. I feel like every area of disability has continued to be that way. Like the more incremental gains we get, the more there's still, things that need to be challenged. And
right.
yeah, yeah.
We need more
Um,
people to see and know disability.
Absolutely.
Disability affects 1 in 3 people. So why are we not seeing these 1 in 3 in the
Yeah.
gym or
Yeah.
1 in 3 in the grocery store?
Well, and
We
then
have
it's
an
kind of
access
this
issue.
common thread with everything, right? Like at some point, someone's like anybody's going to have some type of disability,
Right,
So I think,
right.
yeah, just realizing that it requires a level of like openness and, like empathy and acceptance, I think is such a big part of
Absolutely.
all of it. In terms of like adaptive equipment, I'm curious, are you able to like have grants or secure funding for equipment to allow people to play the sports there?
Yeah, so there are a lot of grants available for athletes to get their adaptive equipment, like their sport wheelchair, for example, for free. So that's not through the university, that's kind of other grants. There are some grants through the university. This is the first year that the university has allotted us scholarship funding.
Mhm.
So we can recruit athletes, adaptive athletes from around the world, in hopes that they'll come to the University of Michigan on a scholarship.
Mhm.
And the scholarship is in perpetuity over the course of a 4-year
Oh, great. Wow, that's
degree
great
for
to hear.
athletes. Yeah, so that's the first year that has happened. So
Yeah.
that's a applause for the chipping away in terms of access. But yeah, grants are a huge part of athletes getting their personal equipment. We have a wonderful family, the Miller family, who had a son who had a disability who went to the University of Michigan, and a lot of the funding they give us is in memoriam of their son.
Mhm.
So they sponsor a couple of events for us throughout the year. But I will say a lot of the fundraising that we have to do is pretty independent.
Yeah.
The university does not yet see us as, we are not recognized as part of athletics, the athletics department. So maybe someday we'll be in there and get some
Yeah.
similar funding to other sports. But right now we are under the student life division, not athletics, which has a
Okay.
significantly lower budget. So we
Yeah.
do rely on a lot of grants and donations.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm always curious on that because, with other like able-bodied sports, it seems like there's such a financial incentive for people to go to play. And it's a big deal to get everything basically covered full ride for a 4-year term. So, I'm thinking with adaptive athletics, that has to be something that would happen. I sure hope it does at least.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I will say we do have some athletes with brand deals with NIL deals.
Oh, yeah.
And so like Liquid IV has a partnership with one of our athletes. One of our athletes did an Amazon campaign recently. So there are, they are trying to feature adaptive athletes
Yeah.
in otherwise previously able-bodied featuring companies.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it seems like for some sports, the adaptive equipment, is extremely expensive and complicated, and it's just like, well, to be able to afford even one of those, say some type of specialized wheelchair or whatever, like that's going to be a difficult thing to obtain, I would think, without,
Right.
without kind of like crowdsourcing funding and everything. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's where I'm curious how much of the medical foundation of all of these things are. Like
Mhm.
a sport chair is, I don't think the common person would think of a sport wheelchair as a sporting device, but
Right.
more so a medical device. And
Right.
we know anything with that label of medical device, that price can go
Yep.
skyrocketing over
Yep.
athletic equipment. So yeah, again, I think the representation and awareness of disability in sport can kind of transition these items to necessities for sport
Right.
versus necessity for an individual that has a disability.
Right. Right. And I think it also requires like a broadening of, what is needed like day-to-day life with people with disabilities, like the whole quality of life idea, and recreational things like sports, hobbies,
Right.
whatever, like those are, they're essential for really everybody. So
And we're still figuring it out.
yeah.
I would love to say that I've had the same list of equipment that is needed for an accessible gym since I started. It changes every week. The type of equipment that I might need for an individual for
Yeah.
one particular program may require something that I've never even heard of before that I have to design myself
Well,
just to
that's what
make
I was
movement work.
wondering. Yeah. Yeah. Like it feels like there would just naturally be things where you're like, oh, I don't have that piece of equipment. Let's figure out how to adapt it in a way that, works and is safe and is affordable too. So I'm sure that's like some like hackathon style,
Yeah.
work on that side.
Yep.
Yeah.
We've all had to, if you have used a mobility device for a good period of time in your life, I think we've all
Yeah.
had to engineer or craft
Yeah.
something to help us do a daily
Definitely.
task.
Yeah. Even if it's, well, in my case, I always think about like the duct tape and the Velcro and like things like that to help make it work.
Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah. Yeah. In terms of like the technology and like the state of the art devices that would be available for, adaptive sports, are there any examples of, maybe something that's advanced in a way that has made it possible for people?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing, obviously, the most time that I spend with athletes is in the weight room.
Uh-huh.
And just seeing from any sort of muscle impairment, grip impairment, neural connection impairment, active hands, and they've been around for a long time, but they have fine-tuned those things where the grip around a dumbbell with an active hand or a barbell is just, it's so natural and perfect. And we all just love active hands so much. We use the hooks, we use the full active hand with the full shell grip on top. Active hands have been just amazing. Just
Wow, that's so cool.
And they really are basic, right? Like
Yeah,
it's a grip.
they are. Yeah, yeah.
And
It's the
so many
simplest
folks,
things.
yes, and so many folks without a disability use
Yeah,
grips in the gym. Powerlifters use grips without fail every single time.
yeah,
And so we're just using what's kind of already available to us for
right,
a different
right.
reason.
Do you all work
Um,
with well, I'm sure like I was thinking about like the engineering departments and things there at University of Michigan. Is there any collaboration on anything there?
So recently, we actually had a PhD student from Clemson who knew one of our volunteers for strength and conditioning, who was coming in and just kind of shadowing for a period of time, who is actually trying to develop a more like robotic type active hand for specifically for sport use. So she was working with some of our wheelchair rugby athletes and just kind of observing what they need to do in the weight room and what they need to do on the court. And so she was doing one of her projects as a PhD candidate for engineering on how to create a more roboticized active hand, like a smart
Okay.
active hand.
Yeah, yeah, no, that seems like it's a natural fit for engineering departments to come up
Right,
with things like
right.
robotics, and I'm sure the components are, getting more and more maybe more affordable and better design and everything. So that's and I
Yeah, I
love that
heard
it's such a like applicable part of the degree, right? Like you're actually applying things that you're learning, towards helping adaptive sports.
100%,
Yeah.
100%. There's actually a club at the University of Michigan called MedLaunch.
Uh,
MedLaunch often it's an undergraduate student group, but they often sit in on our student accessibility meetings, and their club is entirely they adopt 4 projects a year that's accessibility equipment, and one of those 4 every year is an adaptive sport piece of equipment. So this year they did something for amputee soccer, which we don't have, but we do amputee soccer events just to try. We just don't have a full team for it. But MedLaunch has been amazing. Every single year they have an adaptive sport. They make a prototype and they include people with disabilities in their testing and trial of the
yes,
products
yeah.
they make. So it's been really cool.
That's great. That's such a big thing is having the actual users test these things out ahead of time, because like engineers can over design something like just to the max, and if it doesn't help achieve the goal, then if you don't get user feedback, it's just kind of a
Right.
pointless
Right.
project in a way. Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. How about for like advocacy and awareness for everything? Like how are you involved in that? Maybe on your like your own personal side, and then is there any like maybe nonprofits or other things you work with to kind of help, put the message out?
Yeah. So I think really the younger that we can get
Yeah.
people living with disabilities to know that they can be an athlete, and that's an identity that they can have even though they have a disability, I think is really important. So there's a couple of organizations. The one that I was a part of when I was 18, I helped found adaptive gymnastics, and it was specifically for young kids with physical disabilities to be in a gym space and use all the equipment there. So we oftentimes do events that are catered toward kids. We are currently bringing adaptive sports into all Ann Arbor, Saline, and Ypsilanti public schools. That's our school district here, 3 different cities. And so if you are in 6th or 7th grade in one of those school districts, you have played wheelchair sports in gym class as part of your curriculum. And so this has been going on for a few years now, and it continues to grow. Tomorrow we have our final project where they pick kind of the most interested 6th and 7th graders to come play a tournament tomorrow of sitting volleyball and wheelchair tennis. And so really, I mean, we are exposing both able-bodied children and children living with disabilities to the idea that sport is for everyone very, very early. It starts with assemblies at the beginning of the year that we go and explain what access is, what awareness is, what disability is, what equity is, and give them that base understanding so that before they are playing those sports, they understand the impact and the larger mission. And so the fact that that's a unit, that's a curriculum that they are experiencing is just really what we want to do for the whole state and hopefully for the whole country someday, that everyone is playing those sports as part of their education.
I would think those kind of outreach events and assemblies that you can have with younger classes would really help to, kind of remove a lot of the stigma early on too that develops with, having adaptive needs with anything, like
Yeah.
including sports. Yeah, that seems like a really effective way to do it, and even just in terms of like knowing what to pursue in higher education, what degrees are possible, like where you want to go, with whatever your academic path is or anything. It just seems like the earlier you can like try to bring down those barriers, the better, at least from my perspective. Yeah.
Yes, and it is working, in case
Yeah.
you're wondering. This was a grant that we received from the university to do this project in the public schools. And we have a researcher who collects pre-participation responses and post-participation responses from the kids. And across the board, they know what equity means. They know how that relates to sport. They know what access means, how that relates to adaptive sport, and they like sport. They learn something new. Maybe 3, 4, 5 more kids from their class were able to be involved in gym class with them in the same format. And so largely these kids are taking this away and remember it in high school and come to us when they get to college, hopefully, and say, hey, I hear you've got 2 able-bodied spots on your wheelchair basketball team. I would love to play. So
wow, that's really great that it can extend over, like kind of their whole career that way too.
That's what we're hoping.
Yeah. Wow, that's really great to hear. I had no idea kind of if things had advanced at all in that kind of area, but it sounds like gradually it's getting there.
Yep.
Yeah. How about if we go like a little bit more into your kind of backstory and everything, like what led you, was it your, obviously part of it had to be your disabilities and dealing with recovery and different devices, but when was there like a moment where you're like, this has to be where I go as a career, as a degree, that process of it?
Yeah. So with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, most folks with the classical type are really, really flexible. And so when I was younger, before the condition had progressed to the point where it was impacting me from a medical standpoint, I was a really good gymnast, and I was able to do that until my body started kind of falling apart. But when the condition started getting bad, I had to quit gymnastics. That always kind of just left this hole for me. And it was such an identity that just I couldn't have anymore in my head of I'm no longer an athlete. That's not something that I can be ever again. And I just missed it. It was such a big hole. And when I went to the University of Michigan for my undergrad, I just had so many friends that were doing intramural sports, or they were a Division I athlete themselves. And I'm using a walker. I can barely get around campus, let alone do all of these fun activities that my able-bodied counterparts are doing. So I helped found Adaptive Gymnastics to give me a piece of that gymnastics back. And I got to be a coach for kids who were growing up just like me and wanted to see themselves as athletes. And it started with 10 athletes. We've served over 100 families. And the program is still going, even though I do not run it anymore. So it really took off. But just kind of getting to have what I wish I would have was really impactful, and seeing the mindset shift between kids who are entering that space so anxious and the space is so foreign to them, probably got exemptions from gym class their whole life, never seeing themselves in anything but a kid who has to be in bubble wrap. And we started competing, performing at halftime at the University of Michigan women's gymnastics meets every year, and just seeing them in front of a crowd doing their routines that they've worked on, having something to work for, was transformational for every athlete involved. And so upon graduating, I had gotten a personal trainer who helped me strength train to be able to be ambulatory again. I got obsessed with it. I loved it. I studied every little bit of it. I got my nutrition certification, started gearing my studies toward it in school, got a postgraduate certification in it. And I started only kind of on the side, individually taking on clients that had adaptive support needs in the gym. And so that was my expertise. I just worked with folks who lived with disabilities in the gym. And then the job offer for the Paralympic strength and conditioning coach was listed. My boss at the time showed me. She was like, "You need to leave work right now. The application closes tomorrow. You're going home. You're filling it out. I would miss you.
Get it done
this
right
is your
now.
dream job. You go home." So I went home, filled out the application. I was missing a couple of the requirements for it, but I was like, you know what? We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But I kept making it on to the interview rounds, just talking about my mission, and it seemed so clearly aligned with what their mission was and what they wanted in a coach. And they kept keeping me around, even though I didn't have the certification that I needed. And I came to an in-person interview where they made me write a workout and implement a workout that everyone could do, but they gave me 5 people with very different disabilities. Some ambulatory, someone had a muscular dystrophy, someone had like a fainting disorder, had POTS. So it was just across the spectrum. Had to on the spot make a workout that worked for everybody.
Wow, well, that had to be a huge challenge, like right off the bat to do.
So fun. It was so fun. I like the little bit of anxiety. And at the end, after talking with everybody, they said, "Let us know when you get that certification." Okay, they're gonna wait for me. So I got certified and got the job offer the day after, and I will never be leaving. This is my absolute dream job. We've got a little over 70 athletes that we work with, and I'm just living the dream.
Well, that had to be like such a like momentum thing, just feeling like, that validating you were on the right, journey and everything, because I don't know if this experience was yours with gymnastics, but it's almost like a new version of yourself has to be created when you lose the ability to do something that's so important for you, know, like I'm curious, like what that was like for you too. Like, how did you approach it? Did you kind of focus on mental health side of things, or how did you kind of pivot?
I was quite young. And so I know for a little bit, it just felt awful. And I think I definitely should have paid a lot more attention to the mental health side of things, and find something to kind of replace it. But it did feel like all throughout high school and initial college experience was just trying to fill this hole that I didn't know what it really was. And I think after having coached adaptive gymnastics, I realized that I did have a competitive drive to be an athlete. I did have goals to be physically, whatever was limiting me by my disability, be physically the best I can be. And I felt like that was the piece that I was missing, was I felt like I couldn't associate athlete with disability. And so watching myself give the label of athlete to a bunch of children with disabilities, I'm like, that was your missing link. That was your missing link, is you took all these identifiers that you held so true to yourself, and you said, I can't have them anymore. But then I was able to give them back, and how fulfilling that was for everyone involved to be able to adopt these terms that usually can't be associated with disability.
Well, I was just thinking, like with even like physical education classes and stuff as a kid, going through elementary school for me and others, like I looked at it as an impossible, like I'm not going to even attempt to, deal with that because
Mhm.
it was, like trying to live up to the able-bodied standards and like injuring something, and and it was just really demoralizing to even think about going. So like the fact that you could, give that to kids growing up at that young age to
Mhm.
realize I can be in a competitive sport, like that. I mean, that just has to be so empowering, I would think, for well, for you and them in a way. Yeah.
And we know the psychology behind what having a team and what building sportsmanship and team camaraderie and that sort of
Community of
bonding
it. Yeah.
does to a child's development. And to say that that's limited to only folks who can participate
Mhm.
in a traditional gym class is just crazy. If we know how beneficial it is and we're actively withholding it from folks living with disabilities, I think is just crazy. And so again, going back to that access and awareness component, gym teachers should know how to adapt across the board. And it's not their fault that they don't know, but
Right.
a
Right.
curriculum for becoming a physical education teacher needs to include
Absolutely.
how to create a sense of team for folks living with disabilities to be a part of the larger team. And I think really the avenue to do that is adaptive sports being for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Bringing in, I mean, right away off the bat, you're bringing those voices in, right away. And I'm sure like with any kind of training or module or something, you can bring in people like yourself or others who are, skilled at that, designing adaptive sports, and just kind of be like, well, here's what everybody should know about, having a team regardless of, what the ability is. That's like, that would be such a powerful tool, I think, to push forward with this for
Right.
sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And I do think it has never been and never will be about whether adaptive sports are as fun as able-bodied sports or if watching adaptive sports is
Yeah.
as entertaining. We saw with the basketball game that we did,
Mhm.
people do want to watch this stuff. People do want to follow these athletes' stories and their athletic performance. The Paralympics, people got really invested and competitive this year.
Mhm.
And so the kind of big picture has never been that it doesn't attract as many
Right.
folks entertainment wise as able-bodied sports. It's that the access to watch it and be entertained
That's
by it isn't
that's
there.
the point. Yeah, that's the big thing because like I don't remember adaptive like Paralympics ever having quite the momentum that it seemed like it had even, this last
Hmm.
one. It's just,
Hmm.
getting it out in front of people, making them aware that it's even out there is such a big
Exactly.
deal. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
cannot convince me that people wouldn't want to watch wheelchair rugby, a
Right.
match of some of the best teams in the world. I think if it got the same hype and media coverage and reporting and access
Hmm.
as a NBA basketball game, I think over time we would have a lot of viewership. It is so not about it not being entertaining. People
Right.
just don't know about it.
It's
So
just the awareness factor, it's such a big deal. Yeah. Yeah. How about your like support system through the years? Like were there, family, friends, doctors that kind of helped, kind of help you get to where you are now that really helped, well, just helped in any way, I guess, along the way.
my most helpful and favorite people along the way were people who never saw me as a disabled person.
Yeah.
And I was just a friend and I was just
A
in their
person,
life. Yes, I
a
was just a
human. Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
Exactly. So my best friend, she actually competes in the World CrossFit Championships like every single year. Very good. Her name's Alexis Raptis. Um, and she'd been my friend since we were two. So she had seen the ebbs and flows of my very dynamic disability all throughout my life. And it was, we loved tubing as kids, like behind a boat. And no matter what mobility device I was using or what kind of cast I was in that summer, I
Yeah.
was on that tube and
That's
she was holding
right.
on to me. And she
Yeah.
never asked you questions about it. Can you do this? No, she didn't ask. Can you do
Like
this?
we're
We're
doing
doing
it.
it. We're
Yeah.
doing it. It was only, I think, 2 years. No, it was a year after my most recent spinal surgery.
Mhm.
She flew me out to Utah for a hiking trip. And she was just like, we're gonna make it happen.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care. Like, she's like, I got
Whatever it
this really
takes, we're
cool
doing it.
hike. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got this really cool hike and I got this one. We're just gonna figure it out. We're gonna do it.
Yeah.
And so that was my favorite type of kind of energy. My
Yeah.
brother was the same way. He's able-bodied. He was an athlete. He was amazing at everything. And his kind of competitive force of, I'm in a cast and he's doing flips on the trampoline and he's like, you're coming on the trampoline, like I'm gonna bounce you around and you're gonna
Yeah.
do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
So I think those were my most influential people, were the people that were like, I don't care.
Right. Right. And that's the other thing about that too, is they have an idea of like your day-to-day like life, and I find that's such a big deal too, is when you have those people that they just do whatever you're doing and support you. And I mean, it's fun, right? It's like, yeah, there's no barriers at all when they, I feel like are understanding of you and just like go for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the people who aren't afraid to rip the bubble wrap off. That's
Exactly.
always
Exactly.
my turn when people are a little too safe with me to where
Yeah.
they're gonna change where we're having our social event, or we're gonna change the way you talk to me even,
Yeah.
or the way you talk to me when I'm sitting in a chair versus when I'm standing.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
it's the people who rip the bubble wrap off and just meet that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And don't let any, like, they don't do any labeling, any judging of somebody based on, physical ability that way. So yeah, that's great. I always find that, it's so helpful when you have kind of that foundation of, friends, family, whoever that kind of gets behind you. And it doesn't have to be that many people, right? It can be just a few that kind of help, I guess, help you achieve what you're wanting to. So that's huge. Um, as far as like your maybe escape or like hobbies, things you like to do away from, and maybe weight training or whatever you're passionate about on your side, maybe is a way to do that too. But like just something you do to enjoy just because to kind of, you know, just get away from things.
I have a wiener dog with a joint condition,
Oh,
who is
okay.
like my pride and joy.
Nice.
So I love her. Her name's Peggy. So she's like
Oh
my
man.
hobby slash child.
Yeah.
But I actually during the pandemic, just for an outlet, and I wasn't doing any strength training because God knows you couldn't go in a gym or
Not
anything.
true.
But
Right.
I started baking cakes, and that was a really, really fun thing for me. It's not as bad on my hand joints that I thought it was going to be. I
Yeah.
used to play piano and guitar, and it just got really
Like
painful.
kill the joints. Yeah.
Yeah, awful. And even like typing, like I used to write, typing's pretty hard for my fingers now. But decorating cakes was never, it's
Just
still to this
love it.
day, it never has
Yeah.
hurt my hands. So that's something that I made a little cake business. That was my
Yeah.
only job during COVID. Was I made cakes for people and I dropped them off on people's doorsteps on their birthday because
Nice.
they couldn't,
Yeah.
go out and get them. So I
Yeah.
still make cakes every now and again, but that
Yeah.
probably couldn't be farther from, doing strength and conditioning.
Right. No,
So
that's the kind of thing I always find that, it's not so much like we have so many different areas that we're passionate about or we like, and they don't even have to be related like that. So that's really cool. Do you get super like detailed and creative with the cakes and everything on decorating? Like what?
I try to.
Yeah,
I don't get that many orders anymore just because my job got so
the
crazy. We
demands.
travel on the weekends during
Yeah.
season, so I don't get to do them a lot anymore. But when it was COVID
Hmm.
and the only thing on people's minds were like food and how do I make somebody feel loved
Sourdough
even though
bread,
I
right?
can't buy yeah.
Yeah.
I was doing wedding cakes, so multiple tiers. Really loved doing I mean, I was 21 at the time. So
Yeah.
a very popular cake was a 21st birthday cake called the Drunk Barbie cake. So
Nice.
people would ship me a Barbie that looked like
Yeah.
themselves, and I would, try to make them look disheveled, and they'd
Oh,
be like
yeah.
passed out on the cake.
Nice.
So that was always a really, really fun one to do.
Yeah, bringing in a little bit of the humor element too. That's always
Yep,
fun.
yep.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, I feel you too on the little dachshund. Like I had one that was just like so entertaining. Her joints, obviously just went crazy as she got
You had a
older.
dachshund.
Yeah, yeah. Her name was Ginger. So, she was
Ginger.
she was so tiny, like she had the short hair, and man, she was like she ran the household, I think, at the time. She,
That's really, yeah, they think they're a princess.
I mean, the smaller the dog, like the bigger personality they have, I feel
Hmm,
like.
hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That's awesome. I have heard that anybody with a dachshund, they find each other.
That's yeah,
That's what I've heard. So I didn't know of anybody who had one, or I never even really see them
yeah.
walking about. But ever since I got one,
Yep.
they're like everybody's like, "Oh my God, that was my favorite dog I ever
It's like the
had."
unspoken bond of dachshund
Yes,
owners.
yes.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
maybe a little bit of the trauma from the, the
Well,
craziness at times,
right,
but
right. Yeah, they get kind of bossy
they're
for sure.
scrappy.
Yeah,
They're
yeah, they
yeah.
are. Yeah, and always like trying to like sneak food. At least
Mhm.
in my case, mine she found a basket of rolls during like Thanksgiving or something one time and just like went crazy on
And it was
them.
a little too quiet. You realize a little too late. It's been a little
That's
too quiet in
yep,
the
yep.
house.
You
Yep.
realize when they're silent, something is up,
Something's
for
wrong.
sure.
You
Yeah.
ate something.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Yeah. Do you try to like help like design anything to help, your dachshund to get around or anything? I know like they have some adaptive things out there
Yeah, so
now.
she has a progressive condition. So when she was a baby and she was
Uh-huh.
growing, it was really bad. Like her hips would displace all the time,
Yeah.
as she was growing. But since she stopped growing, she's only 3, but she stopped growing like a year and a half ago, and we haven't had any issues. Like sometimes she'll limp, like she'll tripod it up as we
Mhm.
call it, through the backyard, but it usually goes back in without us having to do anything. But usually with her condition, they do end up with the wheels,
On
with
the back.
the little
Yep,
strap
yep.
and use some wheels in the back. So I've already looked into, the cost of getting one custom, and wow,
It's expensive, I'm
I
guessing.
gotta start saving now. Yeah.
Yeah. Everything like that is like just sky high.
Yep,
But still,
yep.
I mean, having it available is nice though, because I feel like, pets they can adapt too for a bunch of different reasons. So
Yeah,
very
yeah.
cool. Yeah, I'm happy to find another dachshund fan out there. That's really great.
This is your sign to get another one, maybe.
That's hey, well, I'm not sure. I have a little corgi Aussie here by my doorway, so I'm not sure
That's
she
the
would
only
approve.
other kind of dog I like, is a
Yeah,
corgi. I like a
yeah.
dachshund or a corgi.
And again,
That's
the
awesome.
personalities, like, like if
Hmm.
anybody else comes in, it's a serious thing. You're not, don't be impeding on my turf here. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, I really appreciate the time, Abby. I don't want to take too much of your day, but as far as nutrition goes, I wanted to ask you a little bit about that.
Hmm.
Like what have you found as, an adaptive athlete and everything? Have you found like sort of a program or something that works really well for you on the nutrition front?
Yeah, so generally speaking, and I have a nutrition certification, but I'm not a doctor, so take everything with a grain of salt.
True, true.
But largely I've seen that wheelchair users and folks living with an amputation need more food. Just the quantity needs to be higher. There was a study recently, and I'm going to botch the percentage of it, so I'm going to try to not even give you specific numbers.
Yeah.
But people with a single limb amputee have an energy expenditure that is above 50% plus over someone without an amputation, or them prior to their amputation. So calorie expenditure, energy expenditure across the board for wheelchair users and folks with amputations, you need more food. You're probably not fueling your body enough, especially if you're adding intentional physical activity into your regimen. Muscles are hungry, hungry, hungry. They love carbs, they love protein. So if you are setting out to start a physical exercise journey and you have a disability, please remind yourself that you should not be eating the same amount that before you started going to the gym. You should be eating probably a lot more.
Much more. Yeah.
Especially as you start to get stronger and build more muscle. Muscle is the only thing in your body that is hungry all day at rest. Muscle's doing nothing and it wants to eat calories. So
Yep.
fuel your body if you want to see the fruits of your labor in the gym.
Yeah.
As far as athletes go, carbs, I think society has just kind of made carbs seem like such an enemy. But if you are active, carbs are the preferred source of energy for your body. So the breads, the pastas, the Rice Krispie treat,
Yeah.
the
Hey, there we
cereals,
go.
the oats.
Yeah.
Those are all really, really efficient sources of fuel for your body if you're partaking in physical activity. So they're not the enemy. You need them. Your brain needs them. Your body needs them. So try to ignore any of that diet culture stuff. That is not what we are out to do. We are out to be the healthiest versions of ourselves, not just the cutest in a swimsuit. And it doesn't matter anyway.
Or just doing the end fad, right? The thing that everybody's talking about. Yeah.
Exactly. You probably need more food than you think you do as someone who's active and has a disability.
That makes so much sense. I definitely agree with you on the whole carb thing being like the villain of food out there. So that's very good information, I think, for people to have. But yeah, I really appreciate, all the areas that we got into. It seems like there's, so much going on in adaptive sports that I really wanted to know more about, and I was like, what? I found your profile. I was like, I have to talk to Abbey about this because this is, kind of the, I guess, pushing boundaries and pushing the edge of adaptive sports.
And I feel very lucky that I'm one of 2 people with this specific job in the country. And so I'm hoping that with being kind of early and young, I'm only 25 in this career space, that with the missions that we have in mind, we get to shape kind of what the up and coming para strength coaches and para coaches para programs look like moving forward. And I think, with all of the heads that have come together, we're on a good track to kind of setting the precedent of what adaptive sports can look like. And so I'm excited to see where I go from here. So I'm always looking to chat with folks who are like-minded and are in the mission too. More heads to come together.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to definitely keeping up with what's going on, and maybe we can do something in the future too to collaborate and spread the message.
Let me know if you're ever in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, definitely. I moved to Tennessee last summer, and I had been in New Mexico for like 30 years. So now I'm kind of expanding the range of where I can visit and check out. So yeah, definitely, if I'm in the area, for sure.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, appreciate it. And how would you like people to reach out more if they want to know more about you? Is Instagram kind of your preferred place, or
I would say Instagram is the place that most of our program and our staff is super active there. And so Instagram's a great spot. Just my name, Abbey Phillipson. Abbey spelled kind of weird, Abbey. Except I found out today, not very weird. As your mom, same spelling. But yeah, Instagram's where we put all of our funny stuff, our not so funny stuff, and any information about getting involved or becoming part of the mission.
That's the one-stop shop for finding all things adaptive sports.
Exactly.
Yeah, great. Well, I appreciate it, Abbey, and I'm looking forward to sharing our chat and see if we can help continue the journey for you there.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was a wonderful conversation to have.